I'm going to introduce to you now General Paul W. Tibbets, who, as most of you know, helped to organize and train the 509th Composite Group, which worked closely with the logistical and operational aspects of the Manhattan Project. He was the commander of the Enola Gay, which dropped the first atomic bomb in human history, and he is the author of The Return of the Enola Gay, now in revised edition published by Midcoast Marketing, 1998. We are going to see about a 14-minute video narrating a number of the events that are pertinent to General Tibbets, and thereafter he will be available to answer questions that you have about the events on the video or more general aspects of his career involvement.
Thank you, Dr. Bass. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, I have a hell of a hard time hearing. I have to be punched. Now, I don't know what the man said about me, but I'm sure I deserved every word of it. I'm delighted to be here. We're going to have some fun this afternoon. I've never stood in front of an academic group and made any remarks or anything, or I'd be more polished like Dr. Bass is. I'm just one of those guys that rolls up my sleeve and I get down and say, here we go. We're going to show you right here to start with a 14-minute film. Now, this film was made several years ago by a visual arts company up in Connecticut called the Greenwich Workshop. And the reason that Greenwich Workshop did this was because of a man that they had in there that was most interested in history and so forth. The proposition was that we, as members of the two airplanes, would be interviewed someplace throughout a period leading up to about 5 years ago. These people came to me and said, look, we don't believe everything that we've heard these people who interviewed you and so forth and so on. Anything that you've said to a recorder and been transcribed and then stated, we don't believe half of that either. Would you like to have the public hear the truth from you people as to what you actually felt like in those days when you were in the 509th Composite Group? The answer was obviously yes, because I had been dismayed by some of the stuff that was being written as far from the truth as 180 degrees. And on the basis of that, they made this film with us. It's no rehearsal, no nothing. They told us, we're not going to tell you what to do. We don't have a script. You guys get together and you talk. You're going to see the fellas, they're in their senior years because of the recent time. But on the other hand, if you could just imagine taking 30 to 40 years off of them, they were a hell of a bunch of guys, I'm telling you. And you're going to get that. When I come back, I'm going to talk a few minutes about the 509th Composite Group. But then I hope in the meantime, between the film and words I can tell you, that you will come up with some questions, because I would like to tell you what you want to hear rather than what I think you should hear. The film's going to start when I get out of here, and you excuse me, but I've seen this thing several times. I'll go out and then I'll come back. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to give you a few words about this 509th Composite Group. Before that, I'm going to tell you how I got involved in the thing. To give you a quick synopsis of what I did during the war, I got into B-17s in a hurry. I was in B-17s in December of 41, at the end of the end.
Is this on?
Is it coming better?
This isn't even on. Pardon me? There's no PA. No, just okay. There's no PA, so
oh,
speak
I thought,
loud.
Well, hell, I can talk. Okay. I forgot what I was going to say. That's terrible. I'll think of something else. B-17. The idea was to give you an idea of what my background was, to answer a question that's been asked hundreds of times, and I said I didn't know. In other words, how did you get selected for this project? I said, I didn't know. I was told that's what it was. I saluted and left after I'd been told what it was. Now, in September 44, I was very happily indulged in testing the vulnerability of a B-29 to fighter attack in conjunction with the University of New Mexico. They had an airplane there, a B-29. It had camera guns on it because it had turrets. It was a regular combat airplane. Am I getting out? Yep. A regular combat airplane. And that airplane on a particular day had lost 2 engines. It was found out when they landed from their flying for the day on a track 25,000 feet and 25 miles in length for fighters to come in and attack and photographs to be made and all that, but gun cameras on both airplanes. That thing broke. The B-29 did. Well, I got called real quick to come in. What is going, can you do anything to expedite the change of these engines? And I said, no. It takes so much time to change them, and I can't expedite anything. Why? And Dr. Workman, he was the head of the physics department of University of New Mexico, and he was the man that had this government project to produce this description of what the vulnerabilities were or were not. And he said, oh my God, he said, today's the last day of my program, and it's so important to have this. And I said, well, look I arrived in here in a B-29 flying machine. It had no turrets, it had nothing, but it's got 4 engines on it, and it'll fly. He said, I don't care about, any guns on the airplane, on the bomber airplane. I got all I need on the fighters. To make the story short, I got the airplane, went into the air with it after being briefed and flying the track and all that sort of thing that they wanted. I was flying along there just happy as hell after about an hour and a half, had on autopilot, and I was watching these fighters. They're all fancy dudes. They come in and they do something, they get them up and roll them, and they do those things. I didn't pay attention to what the airplane was doing. I was just turning it around back and forth and all that sort of thing by the autopilot control. And I heard a couple of voices come up and say, tell him to slow down, I can't catch him. Tell him to slow down, my engine's overheating. Well, him to slow down, that had to mean me, so I looked at my airspeed indicator. Of course, it's a little bit higher than normal. I'd burned off a lot of gasoline in that time that I'd been up there doing this, lightened my load, and the airplane had sought its own level. It just kept going up, and I was at 31,000 feet. Well, that was 6,000 feet higher than they could get. That I registered real quick. That's my safety factor right there. Next step was I got assigned to the Manhattan Project by being called from that job into General In's office. He was Command General of 2nd Air Force in Colorado Springs, to be interviewed by him for something. I know what it was, but it didn't make any difference. And the words were from where was I at? New Mexico there, Alamogordo Field in New Mexico, to Colorado Springs. I had my B-4 bag and so forth in the airplane, and the words were, bring your B-4 bag with you because you're not going to go back, meaning you're not going to go back to Alamogordo. Well, that triggered something, but what the hell, I had a lot of strange things happen to me. First excuse, I've lost both salivary glands, and I have to have water to keep my throat lubricated. It is water, too. Okay, I arrived at General In's office the following morning at the time specified. I walked into his secretary and identified myself. She said, yes, Colonel Tibbets, we've been expecting you. And she punched her button on the squawk box. The voice said, yes. And it was General In, obviously. She said, Colonel Tibbets is here. He said, tell him to wait a minute. Well, okay, fine. I didn't think anything about that. Man's busy. I waited a minute or two, and out from his office comes the lieutenant colonel with the Corps of Engineers insignia on him. He got a bunch of books and stuff under his arm. He walks over, sticks out his hand. He said, I'm Jack Lansdale. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Why would a lieutenant colonel wearing a Corps of Engineers insignia want to talk to me? He said, there's a cloakroom over here. It's kind of private. Let's walk over there and we can talk. I said, fine. He laid out a bunch of leaves and papers and so forth and so on. He asked me a couple of questions. He said, did you say this in Cincinnati, Ohio, or did you say that or something else in Miami, Florida, and so on and so forth. Well, I had said those things that he was asking me, but it went back as far as I could remember when I was about 9 years old. And that kind of worried me. But then he got up to my proper age. And the guy looked at me, he said, "You ever been arrested?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What for?" I said, "Well, my old man was good to me, bought me an automobile, gave me money to run it, to go to school and everything else." And I said, in the summertime when I was not in school, I'd have a date, we'd run over to Miami Beach or back or something, run a little bit late. I said, "I should step down on that accelerator." He said, "I don't mean that. Anything more experience?" Right then, I knew the bastard knew something. I said, "Yes." He said, "What?" I said, "Well, one night, I don't remember the time, but one night or early morning hours in Surfside." Surfside was almost an isolated place in those days, north of Miami Beach. And I said, "One night at Surfside, I was in the back seat of my automobile with a young woman, and we were in a hell of a compromising position. A flashlight comes through the window and says, 'What's going on in there?'" He started laughing and slapped his leg. He said, "That's all I want to know." He wanted to know if I'd lie to him. Well, I wasn't going to lie to anybody, so he said, "Come on, let's go see General Lent." We walked into General Lent's office. He looked at General Lent. He said, "I'm perfectly satisfied. Lansdale was the chief of security for the Manhattan District, and they had been investigating me." I learned later on they'd been investigating me for a year and a half on that sort of thing. So fine, I got that. I got selected because General Lent said that I was the one that he would choose when General Arnold asked him 3 names. He said that Paul Tibbets is the one I would recommend, and that was, Arnold said, "Get him." So that got me into General Lent's office for that particular purpose. Now, by that time, I'd had about 15 months of testing B-29s one way or another. And the airplane, when they started explaining it to me, Dr. Norman Ramsey, a nuclear physicist, was in there. Captain Parsons, Navy captain, was there. And between Ramsdale and Parsons, it briefed me on the atom bomb, what they were doing. They didn't have it made yet, but they were right at the point they had to use airplanes. So this brings Tibbets into the picture. I was briefed completely on what I could do and what I couldn't do. The answer was you could do anything you want to do if you can back it up. But nobody will know whether that until after the war's over. If you've done something wrong, you might get put in prison. If you did something all right, well, maybe nobody say anything. Because all the money that was put into the Manhattan Project, $2 billion worth, was not on the congressional record as such. It had been attached to some other bill and fed through and I think it was Senator Simpson was an elderly man. He was trusted by his congressional people, colleagues and so on, and he's the one that General Marshall knew, and that's how they got this money to support the Manhattan District. Now let me get off of the academics. Let's get down to real business. I was given instruction to organize and train a unit that could drop these bombs on enemy territory in Europe and Japan simultaneously. They had to be done simultaneously because they didn't want anything to get out. They wanted to be the surprise to be the same or both theaters at the same time on account of Russia. With that situation, I knew what I had to have. I had to have a split operation right away. And General Lent said, "Well, look, you've got to have B-29 airplanes." And he said, "I'm going to send a couple." First he said, there is a squadron at Hastings, Nebraska, 393rd Bomb Squadron at the 504th Group. He said, "Me and my people here looked at the records of their training, and they seem to be the best B-29 squadron we have in training. And you go look at them, and if you like them, we'll send them to Wendover," because I had told him that when he gave me the fields I wanted Wendover, Utah, preference instead of getting field in Great Bend in Kansas and one up in North Dakota, which I don't remember. But anyway, with that situation, I left his office with the word, "Go do what you have to do. use the 2nd Air Force as your media to get you what you need by normal requisitions. If something is needed that you don't have a normal requisition, put silver plate on it and send it in. And because General Arnold had said silver plate will be honored without any question. He told the Pentagon staff, without any question whatever, don't ask questions, honor the requisition. Now we'll proceed on a little bit faster. As a result of that, I got the opportunity. I put in a standard requisition for 15 B-29 airplanes. I got those B-15. I got those 15 B-29 airplanes without one question, and after they had been, my serial number had been allocated to me, I got a call from a man that I had roomed with in Kelly Field when we were just getting ready to graduate down there. He was an aeronautical engineer from Purdue, and he called me. He said, "Paul, this is what." Ryzen was his name. He said, I know you got I got some kind of a project, I don't know what it is, but you're getting 15 new B-29s out of the Martin plant at Omaha, Nebraska. I said, good. He said, would you like to have fuel-injected engines on them? See, carburation was one of the biggest problems B-29s had in those days. I said, you know I would do it. He said, I thought so. Would you like to have 15 sets of Curtiss reversible pitch propellers to put on them? Well, brake energy was something that kept those B-29s from stopping when they were loaded and started down the runway, losing outboard engine, you couldn't control it. Brakes wouldn't do it, didn't have enough wind to cross the tail to give you that capability to turn it or do whatever you wanted. I said, I sure would. He said, I thought so. I just wanted to tell you there are 40 sets of them being sent to Omaha for your airplanes. Well, that was really a good thing. Now, I knew that the airplane was going to be wonderful. But what I had to do was take those airplanes, not physically take them, we had to get the airplanes from Omaha. The Air Force had to buy them at Omaha. Then we had to take them over to Offutt Field. Of course, they're within the confines of Omaha, and I say that particularly because the factory was not on Offutt Field business. It was off of there. And I had worked with Dr. Oppenheimer's people. He had some wonderful engineers down there in that Los Alamos lab. They told me what they needed, which was above my head, but I said, okay, fine. We'd go to the manufacturer, we'd tell him that this is what's needed on those airplanes. Manufacturer says, well, we can't do it here, but we'll get that hangar at Offutt Field. Air Force will take delivery on them, pay us for them, then we'll get them over to the hangar over there, and they'll be modified there. And it was about a 3-week deal to modify each airplane. What they did was they stripped all the armament out of them except in the tail, all of the turrets, all of the ammunition tracks, all of the, well, I said armor plate. Didn't want any armor plate around seats or anywhere else, because I knew if we could get up there, 31,000, which I was sure, with those fuel-injected engines, we'd do that. The airplanes came through on delivery as they were supposed to come, not all at one time, but a few at a time. 2 at a time, I think, was the best. I learned also, because I had to be self-supporting, and that was because of security, that I would need transport airplanes. And I sent in a requisition for 5 C-54 airplanes, transport airplanes, 4-engine transports. The requisition came back disapproved. Well, I took the thing, went in and gave it to a friend of mine a contact man who was a friend of mine in General Arnold's office. I called him, I said, hey, I got this thing. He said, well, give it to me. He said, write silver plate on it. But he said, before you do, go back and see the general that just wrote his disapproval down there and see if you tell him you have silver plate, that he will give it to you. I said, fine. So I went back to see this general, he's a big fella. I looked at him, I said, General, I need those airplanes. He said, damn it, he said, the air transport commands need them worse than you do. He said, I just gave you 15 B-29s. What you trying to do, start Tibbetts' first individual Air Force? I said, no, sir. He said, well, the answer goes, I still disapprove it. You can't have them. Yes, sir. I walked out of his office, went back, saw my friend at the Pentagon, handed him the requisition. He said, you going to be here the rest of the day? I said, no, I'm on my way back to Wendover. He said, well, go on back to Wendover. I'll give you a phone call. A second day from my departure, my phone rang first thing in the morning, which is about 11 o'clock for the Pentagon. And it was my friend. He said, you got a pencil and paper? And I said, yeah. He said, take these down. Here's the serial numbers and the date your C-54s will be delivered. And I wrote my 5 C-54s down for delivery and all that sort of thing. I said, what happened? He said, well, General Arnold always had his deputy chiefs of staff come into the office every morning to talk about what happened yesterday, what we're going to do today, what we're going to do tomorrow, or in the future. It was a get-together to share knowledge. And he had a habit, he always stood in the doorway. And as each 3- and 4-star general came through, he shook hands with him, good morning, General so-and-so. But he had told this man, when the deputy for operations requirements comes up, tell him to stay back and let his man come in. Fine. Everybody got greeted, good morning, General, as he walked in by Arnold. And when this other guy walked in, the man that wouldn't give me my airplanes, he looked at him and said, good morning, Major. Well, everybody in those days had temporary rank. So he took him down from a brigadier general, he took him down to the rank of major. And he turned around to the other generals sitting there with their mouths open. He said, gentlemen, I said one time that all silver plate acquisitions would be honored. Do I need to repeat it? Well, no, I guess nobody answered him. I don't know. But anyway, I never had any trouble after that, but now I'm going to skip a little bit in ahead of time because I'm hitting and missing to give you some key points. I really took advantage of that that silver plate name. And what I did was I went out to see General LeMay and tell him I was coming out there with this organization into his theater and so forth and so on, what it was going to do. And he listened very carefully. And he looked at me, he said, think the damn thing will work? I said, yes, sir, I think it'll work. He said, have you told Admiral Nimitz? Of course, Nimitz was a theater commander. I said, no. He said, well, don't you think you ought to? I said, yes, sir, I'll tell him. So he got on the telephone, he called Nimitz, and I was taken over to his headquarters, introduced, and I told him basically what I told LeMay, and he looked at me with a very nice, friendly smile. He said, is the Navy doing everything they can to help you? I said, sir, as far as I know, they're doing everything just perfect. He said, well, if they don't, he called, Kincaid, come here. Here comes a 3-star admiral. He said, if you need anything from the Navy, you tell Kincaid and he'll get it for you. Yes, sir. That ended that conversation. I had to bring that out. Now, I said a while ago that this was a peculiar outfit. We had to have, for the project, we had to have peculiar type people that the Air Force didn't have an MOS for. So we had to go outside to get it. Well, the biggest thing I got outside was an Army military police company, because we had to have guards, we had to have tightest security in the world. I had to have people out of the heavy maintenance group with their ability to fix airplanes that broke, because we couldn't take them to a depot. They were modified. We had to fix our own airplanes. So I got metal workers. But the chief jewels of the whole outfit was from the Army Ordnance. We got tool and die makers, because we had to have tool and die makers in this business to make tools for unknown reasons. And whatever didn't have a tool like it, tell them what you needed, and they'd do it. And I'll tell you, those guys could do it. Now, while I'm on that one, that was the most important outfit I had. That squadron, 1st Ordnance Squadron, that's what it was called. And 1st Ordnance Squadron Air. I got real concerned when my security man came to me. He was a major, a very brilliant man, very capable guy. His name was Enola. And he said, in your organization, he said, you have, this is when I got this thing all put together with the people. He said, in your organization, you have 5 escaped felons My mouth dropped. He said, that's not unusual. A guy getting out of prison, where can he hide any better than a 4 million man army? And I said, I guess that makes sense. And he said, do you want to know who they are? I said, yeah, I want to know who they are. So he laid the dossiers down to show them. 2 of them were murderers, escaped. 3 of them were manslaughter, a total of 5. And Enola said to me, do you want to keep them? And I said, let me talk to their boss. And I just got on the phone and I called the ordnance people and I called these names out. I said, those men important to you? He said, God, they're the most important skilled people I got. So I turned around, fine, thank you, that's all I want to know. I turned around to Enola and he said, okay, fine, let's call them in and tell them we know who they are. I said, let's do that. So we called them in individually and showed them proof in writing that they had escaped, where they escaped from, what their real name was, and what their sentence was. And each one of them, after we got through, I said to them, you go back to the squadron, keep your mouth shut, and if you continue doing the work you've been doing, when this war's over with, I'll give you these papers and a match to burn them up. And that's what they did. They never broke security, they never did anything. Now, security being tight, I'll tell you how tight it was. Out on the island, my organization was assigned to the 313th Bomb Wing, commanded by a brigadier general, a very nice man, really nice. And he always had us come up to his mess during the weekdays to see what happened last night, what are we going to do tonight, and all that sort of stuff, pass the information around. His name was Jim Davies. And so I was used to that, but one day I'd been out flying on a training mission, and I came back and landed, and my adjutant was out there. He said, the general's office called and wants to know if you'll come up 15 minutes early. And I said, sure. And I went as quickly as I could, changed my clothes and washed my face and hands. I went up to his office, and when I walked in, he said, I went out to look at one of your airplanes today. I said, oh? He said, yeah. He said, the guard on duty wouldn't let me look at it. I said, he wasn't supposed to, General. You didn't have proper pass. He said, I know. I thought it was funny. He asked me if I had a green pass, and I said to him, no, I don't need one. I'm General Davies. I command this place. And he took out his AGO card and threw it at the foot of the guard, and the guard said, he said, General, I recognize you. I don't need to see that, but you don't have a green pass. You can't get on this airplane. He says, well, I can. And he said, I took one step forward. That rifle came right straight at my belly, cocked, and said, General, one more step and you're dead. He said, would he have shot me? I said, there's no doubt in my mind he would have shot you. He said, I thought so. That's the reason I came back here and called you. Oh, we had some busters in that outfit. I'll tell you, Enola, then I'm going to get on to the business of the day. This man, Enola, came to Wendover, having been at the University of Chicago, been at Chicago, because they were suspicious, the security people were suspicious that the Enrico Fermi's laboratory had a mole in it. And it did have a mole. And I said, well, Bud, how'd you turn that up? He said, oh, it was simple. He said, they were kind of stupid in their habits. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we listened to him 3 times. He said, I tapped all the wires in and out and all that sort of stuff. He said, because he was an electrical engineer. I said, how'd you get the wires tapped? He said, well, we just go into the office complex and I'd get my partner to make passes at the switchboard operator. And while they were busy, I'd hooked up the listening devices. I said, that's a good bit of work. He said, oh no, but he said, they always met under the same street light, which was about 2 blocks distance from the stadium, at almost the same time. And I said, well, what'd you do? He said, well, on this particular night, they were going to do the same thing again. And he said, okay, what's the next move? He said, well, partner and I said, we got in our automobile, we got down in that area, we parked it in the dark. He said, maybe 40 yards away, and we waited for him to meet. I said, did they? He said, yeah, they met, and they exchanged papers and so forth, back and forth. I said, what you guys do? He said, nothing. We just took the rifles out of our back seat and killed the bastards. He wasn't kidding. He said, look at, who would anybody in Chicago give any consideration to a couple of naked stiffs laying in the gutter at midnight? I said, I guess you got something there. But this is how serious they were. They were just as serious as could be. And I felt that when I had been briefed by Lansdale up in General Ent's office. Okay, there were other little nitpicking things that came along, but didn't amount to hill of beans. And but I did have a couple of guys that went on a furlough, and a couple, I had about 5, went on a furlough after being told, you know, don't do any talking. When you sleep in the barracks, you don't ask the guy next to him what he does. You just do your business, and that's it. Well, anyway, these guys left on their furlough, and to go anywhere from Wendover, Utah, you have to either go to the train station at Wendover, which goes to Salt Lake, or comes from Elko, Nevada. That was the media of getting into and out of Wendover, was Salt Lake City, either by air, car, or rail. And these guys had gone home, and they'd been picked up because he'd put his agents at the facilities there at each one of them when the guys went on their furlough. And by the time they got home, there was a message there waiting for them to return to, your orders have been changed, return to Wendover. And I told them when they came in why they were brought back. With that, the next thing was, well, what are we going to do about it? So I told these guys, I said, well, you know, you have broken security now and said things under the wartime conditions. I said, you go back to your barracks under arrest. You can stay there and go to the mess hall to eat, but that's the only place you can go. And you keep your mouth shut, because I may decide to have you court-martialed, shot before a firing squad. And it sunk in. They got back, and then the other guys came back normally. I just let them sweat all this length of time. The other guys came back normally and passed the word around. And from that time on, there was never a break in security from the 509th people that were at Wendover, Utah, or anywhere else. Now let's get last thing to do. We had to test these. First off, the B-29 squadron that I got from training command, 393rd Bomb Squadron, they're a bunch of good guys. They had good spirit. And when I first briefed them, after arriving there, to be quiet, we're going to go into training, we're going to teach you this, we're going to teach you that. They said, we don't need that. We've already done it. I said, you haven't done it to my specifications. I don't know whether you have or not, but this is what we're going to do. We're going to fly an airplane at 25,000 feet at night. We're going to go out over desert land where there's no lights, no radio signals, or no nothing. You're going to navigate by the stars at night. You're going to use sun lines in the daytime. He said, well, it's impossible to get them back. I told him they'd have to do that. They have to come back and close their triangular course with no more than a quarter of a mile separation between the closures. And you had to drop the bomb within 500 feet of the aiming point. They said, well, it's impossible, you can't do it. I said, well, it is possible, and we're going to do it. Farabee Van Kirk and I took the squadron commander, the squadron navigator, the squadron bombardier up, and we flew one of these things for them, with the navigator watching what was going on, the bombardier watching, the squadron commander watching me. And we did just exactly that. And Tom dropped his bomb at 327 feet from the target. Now, this was a 500-pound practice bomb, so it was legal to do that, and we did. Had the whole Salton Desert out there to do it, and it worked real well. Now, they went back. This apparently charged the batteries, because the first thing that I found out was we got to beat the old man. I was the thing that they had to beat, and I smiled. I got what I wanted, and on the basis of that, we had a lot of fun. They were very good, and at the final part of their training, I sent them down to Batista Field in Havana, Cuba, because the commander down there was a man I had known for a long time, and we sent them down there to get out over water, because you have a different problem dropping bombs when you come from water to land or land to water. The perspective is different. And Tom told me this. I'm not a bombardier, but Tom said, it ain't the same thing. It's not too much of an error, but it is an error. And I said, that's fair enough. Well, with that situation, they got down there, and they became very competitive. I had 3 squadrons there at a time. And in one time, I went down every time they were down there. I went to see them just about the time they'd been there for 2 weeks and getting ready to leave, and within a week. And so that I could say I visited each group of 3. And I went down there one time, and towards the end of the thing, the commander there looked at me. He said, "Well," he said, "we had some fun last night." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "How much money have you got to spare?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "How much your surplus money for funds, and so funds to do things?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I don't have any. I only have one." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, last night your guys down there at such and such a hotel, they got so carried away with their battle as who was the best crew. They got into the hotel using fire axes and water hoses." And he said, "I got to buy a whole new hotel furnishings." And I said, "Oh, boy." He said, "Don't worry about it. I got the money. We'll fix it." He said, "Just ask them not to have one of those things every time they come." I said, "Fair enough."